Spooky and scary stories are the best when you just want to relax and fall off to sleep. Or when you just want to imagine your own things and never fall asleep in the dark again. Either way, they are very effective. However, some stories are so scary that they will definitely give you goosebumps. Today we will look at 3 terrifying true horror stories that will give you goosebumps. You better put your big boy pants on, because it's about to get super scary. Intruder. I remember years ago when I was 8, my family lived in a really big but weird house that was kind of on the edge of a small town. The school district was in the middle of a big restructuring, so even though there were only a couple of grades between me and my brother, we both went to different schools. This meant that we took different buses to school. Because of this, I was always the last person to leave in the morning and the first person to get home in the afternoon. This made it my job to ensure all of the lights were off and the door was locked before I left in the morning. One morning, I realized the basement door was open and the light was on. So just as I did every day, I turned off the light and closed the door. When I got home that afternoon, I found the light on and the door open again. I just assumed that I'd forgotten to actually take care of it when I noticed in the morning. So I just went over to turn off the light and close the door. When I got to the top of the stairs, I looked back towards the basement. And just as I did that, I saw a large, shadowy male figure heading toward the bottom of the staircase. This freaked me out, and I slammed the door and pushed a bunch of boxes against it, then went and hid in my closet. For months, I never said anything to my family, because I was positive what I had seen was a ghost. I thought that if I told them, no one would believe me. About a year later, my mom and her boyfriend realized that small amounts of money had been going missing for months. It all amounted to about $800 to $900, but it was never more than $60 at once. We walked all over the house with flashlights trying to find out how they could have gotten in. It turns out that this creep was climbing in through a small hole in the outside of the house, shimmying through a crawl space, then coming up into the house through the basement. This just made me realize that I'd been alone in the house with him at least on more than one occasion, and this was the most terrifying moment of my life. Haunted Attic. A few years ago, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Melbourne, Australia. This was my first time living on my own. The apartment block was pretty old, given that it was built in the 1930s. I had been there for a few months when I came home from work one day and went into the bathroom. However, something was out of place. There was a wooden board that covered a hole in the ceiling, which led to a small attic space. However, this time the board was now on the ground in 2 pieces. I examined the pieces out of curiosity. The board was about 1 inch thick, and it would have taken someone as strong as Bruce Lee to break it. I thought the landlord had sent someone to work on the attic. But even with that, I was still a bit scared. The only thing ringing in my mind at this point was that someone was definitely up there. I emailed the pictures to the landlord, asking if someone had been there. Of course, this was with an undertone of annoyance since she had never warned me about it. But when her reply came, it read, "Please call me as soon as you are able to." Without wasting time, I called, and she explained that her last 2 tenants had said the same thing happened. She promised to replace the board, which she did. About a month later, I woke up one night at around 4 a.m. My body was covered in goosebumps as though someone was rubbing his or her hands on me. Everything was silent, but all that changed when I heard a dragging sound coming from above my bed. It was though someone was dragging a sack of potatoes up there. This made me freeze, already convinced that there was someone up there. 5 minutes later, I worked up the courage to turn on the light, armed myself with a cricket bat, and walked into the bathroom. This was when I noticed the strangest thing. The new board that was added to cover the hole was broken in 2, and just like last time, it was on the floor. However, the dragging sound had stopped at this point, but there was another weird sound. This time it was whispering. The sound was as clear as someone talking next to you, and it was coming from the attic. It sounded like children's voices, and I could hear one sentence over and over again. "It's your turn, it's your turn." Freaked out now, I switched on every light in the apartment to make things feel normal. It was around 5 a.m. and it was dark outside. I tried watching some TV to try and unwind, but then a fuse blew. My pet budgie Dexter, whom I kept in the kitchen, was always silent at night. However, he started squawking as though he were being strangled. I had never heard such noises coming from him like he was screaming. I grabbed my car keys, ran out and sat in my car, waiting for the sun to come up. When I saw people walking their dogs, this made me feel comfortable enough to go back into the house. The front door was open, but I just assumed that I forgot to close it when I ran out. When I went to check on Dexter in the kitchen, he was not in his cage. All the windows were closed, so he could not jump out. As I was walking around the house looking for him, I heard splashing in the bathroom. Dexter was half drowned in the toilet. I took him out, washed him, and dried him. All this was pretty confusing to me. At around 8 a.m., I called the landlord and gave her a simplified version of what happened, and all she said was, "Oh wow, you heard the whispering too." I stayed here for another 18 months. On some occasions, I heard the whispering, and twice the board covering the hole in the ceiling moved. This was pretty terrifying. The perfect crime. On November 10th, 1923, Nathan Leopold committed to traveling 6 hours from Chicago to the University of Michigan. He was accompanied by his friend and lover, Richard Loeb, and their intention was to break into Loeb's former fraternity. But all this had taken was a typewriter, a few watches, some penknives, and about $80 in loose change. Leopold was quite agitated on the way back to Chicago, because the robbery had been a big effort for a small payoff. When Leopold finally stopped complaining, Loeb started talking about committing the perfect crime. And as they continued their journey through the country roads toward Chicago, they broke into several homes and started a few fires. However, none of these crimes made it into the media. All Loeb wanted was to commit a crime that would create a huge buzz, and his idea for this was the abduction and homicide of a child. After planning this all through the winter, in May they went ahead and kidnapped a child they knew had a wealthy father who would pay the ransom. After the abduction, they beat the boy's skull with a chisel, jammed a rag down his throat, and disposed of the body. When the two returned to the city, Leopold dropped the ransom letter into a postbox. However, their plan to execute the perfect crime failed terribly. The following day, a passerby spotted the child's lifeless body, and the police could trace Leopold by finding the eyeglasses he dropped near the body. 10 days after the homicide, the two young men came clean and confessed to the state's attorney that they had slain little Bobby Franks. Leopold even confessed that they killed only for the thrill of it. At the time of the murder, Loeb and Leopold were 18 and 19 years old, respectively. They were sentenced to 99 years in prison. Which story gave you the most goosebumps? Feel free to share in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.